It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. Inside. It ain't the left side or the right side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide. Here with Kat and Paul. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and on Spotify. The Dolphins play the Dallas Cowboys this upcoming weekend in Week 3. The Cowboys a strong 21.5-point favorite heading into this game. Seems like two teams heading in the opposite direction here at this time. We're joined by Connor Livesay from the Blogging the Boys podcast on the Super Bowl Network. He does a lot of great work over there. Go ahead and check out his podcast and his website, Blogging the Boys. Connor, thanks for joining us here tonight.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk some Cowboys and Dolphins.
Absolutely. So before we get into the game, some news that came out here before, really odd timing on this because the Cowboys activated Robert Quinn from the suspension. He was suspended for the first two games. He was with the Miami Dolphins last year. And with that, to get him on the roster, they ended up cutting former first-round pick Taco Charlton. The Dolphins then signed him today to their 53-man roster. So what are your thoughts on Taco Charlton? I imagine they can't be great given that he was a first-round pick just 2 years ago. What went wrong with him in Dallas?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that I think a lot of Cowboys fans are trying to figure out. He was a guy coming out of Michigan that I wasn't sold on. I do a lot of draft work as well, so he's a guy that I watched a lot in the draft. And you saw a lot of his production out of Michigan came, a lot of unblocked assignments. He came from the backside a lot. And he was a guy who played with great effort at Michigan. He got to Dallas. And that was something he always did. He did give you a lot of effort. And it was something Cowboys fans kind of would always falsely give him a reputation, a guy who didn't play with great effort because of kind of his attitude. And I think that's where you kind of start with as far as what went wrong in Dallas. His attitude. I think he didn't have that Rod Marinelli work ethic and attitude. I think he kind of had that entitlement coming out of Michigan as a first-round pick. He kind of thought that he should be the starter. He shouldn't have to earn a lot. And I think that was kind of what went wrong in Dallas is he kind of had that entitlement mindset. And, that's not the way that Rod Marinelli coaches. He's a guy who you come in and you earn it no matter if you're a first-round pick, the highest bidding free agent, the highest, the highest salary cap guy on the team, you're going to have to earn your role. And that was something he never did well. He's got great length. He's got great size. He doesn't always play. He kind of plays softer than what his size would say. But he's got some good traits. He's got some length and he's got some explosiveness that he can play with. It's just not always consistent. So the Miami Dolphins are obviously getting a guy who can play weak side or strong side defensive end, put his hand in the ground and, can affect the quarterback, play the run a little bit, but he's just a guy that needs to play with more consistency and more effort on the field.
Yeah, and he only really had one good year of production at Michigan, and it was his final year. And sometimes you've got to be wary of players like that come out, and also the Cowboys have a very deep defensive line, so I don't think that they're going to miss him, especially with Robert Quinn coming back. But staying on the Cowboys personnel, we're already looking forward to the 2020 offseason here. And I know the Cowboys have some free agents coming up. It seems like they just keep finding this money. I mean, they've re-signed Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, Jalen Smith, Zeke Elliott. Dak's going to get paid too. I guess my question is, where do the Cowboys keep finding all this money? And when you look at a player like Byron Jones or maybe some other free agents, who do you expect kind of gets squeezed out the roster in the 2020 offseason?
Yeah, you anytime you have a quarterback, your franchise quarterback that's a fourth-round pick playing on pretty much little to none, which Dak Prescott has done over the last 3 years, it's going to help as far as salary cap goes. And then, same thing, they didn't have – Amari Cooper has a little bit of a cap hit now, but even when Des Bryant was on the team in 2016, he was obviously released in 2017. Last year they didn't have any high cap hits on their wide receiver depth chart, so a lot of their cap hit was coming from their offensive line. But when your quarterback's making less than $1 million a year, you're saving a ton of money. You're not having even the first-round pick, the Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson. Those guys still have a decent cap hit because they're first-round picks, and then obviously not having to pay Dak the $30, $40 million yet that he's going to be getting here soon. They've saved a lot of their money. They aren't big spenders in free agency. They don't go out and spend money on high-priced guys. So they use the bottom of the barrel guys. They went out and got Robert Quinn this year, which is kind of, a rare move for them. They don't really go out and spend that kind of, resource. I know it was a trade, but they also have him on the salary cap for a little bit of a cap hit, something they're not used to. So they actually went out this year and spent some money. But yeah, when they can save money with Dak Prescott, they had DeMarcus Lawrence on a rookie deal who they re-signed. They had Byron Jones on a rookie deal who's coming up. So they have a bunch of their key contributors and their main starters on rookie deals. Even Ezekiel Elliott, who was he was making decent money as a high first round pick, but was still on a rookie deal, nothing too crazy. So a lot of their top players were on their rookie deals the last 2 or 3 years, and a lot of those guys are getting ready to come up. So they still have a lot of cap space because of that. They were able to roll a lot of that cap space over, and they weren't paying a lot of guys. But in the next few years, with guys like Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, Byron Jones, and some of these offensive linemen that they just paid and are getting ready to pay, a lot of that big cap space is getting ready to run out. So they're definitely they're living in that as far as they can, but it's getting ready to run out here in the next few years. And salary cap always isn't a true thing. You can move things around to make things work,
right.
but in the next 2 years they're going to have to be a little bit smarter with the way they spend.
You bet. And Byron Jones, if he can continue to recover from that hip injury, definitely a player the Dolphins are going to be taking a look at opposite Xavier Howard to try to fill that other cornerback position. Yeah. But let's move on to the game here.
And like you said, he's one that's probably going to get squeezed out because of having to be smart with that money. He's one that's probably going to have to squeeze out, which will probably end up hitting the free agent market, and a guy the Dolphins would definitely be interested in.
Sure. And when you look at the Cowboys roster, I mean, I've always said that Jerry Jones, I don't know why people dog this guy as a talent evaluator. I mean, not only is he owning the team, but the personnel decisions he makes. I mean, don't let Taco Charlton fool anybody. I mean, you take a look at his first-round picks over the last 6 or 7 years, he's knocked just about every one out of the park, not to mention the second-rounders like DeMarcus Lawrence and like Jalen Smith. So sometimes when that happens, you can't re-sign everybody. So that's why a few of the guys like Byron Jones might get squeezed out of the bottom of that roster.
Sure. And Cowboys fans they thank Will McClay for a lot of that. He's the director of pro personnel. He's a guy who does a lot of the draft work as well. Player personnel. Sorry, I said pro personnel, but director of player personnel. He is a guy who a lot of the draft hits, the DeMarcus Lawrence and Byron Joneses. A lot of that goes on to his credit because he does such a great work with the draft, and Chris Hall and all the player personnel guys that the Cowboys have done. They, like you said, though, just being able to hit on even the Anthony Browns, the Xavier Woods, the Malik Collinses, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. That's what's made this roster so cheap and helps the salary cap. When you got guys like that who are starting and playing, a good percentage of snaps for you, it definitely helps out. It helps your salary cap. It helps your team out for the next foreseeable future because you got young guys that aren't, first round picks or old veterans. You bet.
Let's take a look at the game, dip our toe into the water, really at the top. Dak Prescott, just really an MVP here in the first 2 games, and I don't see that dying down really against the Dolphins in week 3. So they played the Giants, they played the Redskins, they beat up on rookie DeAndre Baker in the first game. Dak comes back with another great game against the Redskins, 51 for 62, 674 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, quarterback rating of over 140 and 86 rushing yards. So not a bad start for Dak Prescott. What do you attribute that to here in the first 2 games?
I just think that the offense, you go back even to 2018 into the playoffs, the last 10 or so games, I've seen a different Dak Prescott. I've seen a guy who's played with more confidence. He started the year last year with a well below average wide receiving core, a guy that, Deontay Thompson, Allen Hurns, and Cole Beasley were the top 3 targets for Dak Prescott to start the season last year. That changed rather quick when they noticed that wasn't going to work and brought in Amari Cooper. And I think that addition in itself has been just the difference maker. When you have a guy that where he's going to be, the routes you're going to run are going to be on time, and then he can be on time, I think that's huge. And then when you add in a guys like Michael Gallup, who isn't going to play this weekend, obviously, but guys that are they're consistent threats in the passing game. They're guys that you can rely on, that you can trust to be at the right time, at the right spot at the right time. I think that just makes the passing game click. And then you add a guy like Kellen Moore, who is a younger, more new age offensive coordinator, taking him in place of Scott Linehan. It's just a big difference. It's putting guys in positions to succeed and not just expecting player A to beat player B across from them. And I think that you're seeing that. It's Ezekiel Elliott's out to the most productive season that he's been in since entering the league with his first 2 games. I think that even things like that, you can see that he's putting the offense in personnel packages that aren't allowing 8 or 9 men in the box. He's not just running the ball out of 12 or 22 personnel. He's spreading guys out, making these running lanes easier, than allowing Dak Prescott to check in and out of running plays to give himself positive looks at defenses and giving himself good looks in certain situations in the red zone. And I think that's what you're seeing is a different guy that's being more confident because his offensive coordinator is putting him in those positions and allowing him to be more confident and more aggressive, taking shots down the field.
Zeke Elliott speaks for himself. I mean, 1,434 yards rushing last year, led the league in rushing by about 130 yards, and missed a game, too. He really goes hand in hand with the offensive line of the Cowboys. Lael Collins just got paid, and he's probably not even probably, is the 4th best offensive lineman on the roster, unless I'm missing something here. You've got Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, and Tyron Smith, all 28 years old, combined for 15 Pro Bowls already, which is, you're talking about 3 potential Hall of Fame players on that offensive line.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Lael Collins gets the short end of the stick a lot of the time from Cowboys fans and from other fans around the NFL because he's not a big as name as Tyron Smith and Zach Martin and Travis Frederick, but Lael Collins is a good player. I think he definitely gets, like I said, the short end of the stick as far as guys kind of when they want to pick on somebody, they point to him. But he is a very good right tackle. He's a guy that I think is one of the top 5 best right tackles in the NFL. Just again, when you play on a line with such name, so many notable names, and a lot of people get over. You're going to overlook him because you're going to not see him in the same class. But he's a guy who plays well. He holds his own. I'm really excited to see the matchups, with Charles Harris, a guy who came out of the draft in the first round the same year that Taco did, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be exciting to see those guys go up against each other and see who can win those battles.
Yeah, and Charles Harris was a player I know Dallas was pretty interested in as well during that year. And I'll make it easy for you. He hasn't been that good. Doesn't mean he won't be good, but now you've got 2 players on the edge, and Charles Harris and presumably Taco Charlton getting in there and hopefully seeing some action. See if basically this is a season for the Dolphins. We're throwing what against the wall and seeing what sticks. And they still do have youth on their side, but at this point, the Dolphins may need to find a pass rush from somewhere else. Lael Collins, a player that Dolphins fans wanted in the 2015 draft, and he had that terrible situation where he was completely taken off draft boards for something he didn't even do. And then we were really looking forward to him hitting the free agent market in 2020. Cowboys found some way to get the money together to re-sign him. So, yeah, it makes a dominant offensive line. But the 5th guy in the line is somebody I've seen and I've read a little bit more of a weak link, at least at this point in his career, Connor Williams. 21 years old, or 21 or 22. He's pretty raw coming out of Texas. He switched from tackle to guard. Is he somebody that's coming along a little bit, or is that somebody that you see as kind of the weak link in that unit too?
I think he's more of a weak link than someone like Lael Collins, but I think he's kind of that same group of guys who's going to get more negative feedback than they probably should because they play on a line with so many notable guys. But as you said, Connor Williams was a guy who was a left tackle at Texas, really good left tackle at Texas, came out and moved to guard right away. And that's going to take some learning, some time to learn that position, to build up strength. It's a completely different position. A left tackle is a guy who you kind of normally have more finesse. You play with more athleticism, not a more of a mauler. And that's what you look in your left guards nowadays. You have the guys like the Will Hernandez that came out of UTEP not too long ago as well. And he spent this entire offseason building up strength, getting bigger, getting stronger, being more physical. And I think you're seeing that early, and I think you're seeing, like last weekend they played against Washington, Deron Payne beat him on 2 or 3 snaps throughout the entire game. People wanted to kind of point to that as a bad game, where the other 57, 58 snaps, he was really good. He had a false start. right before right before the end of the third quarter, I want to say it was. But for the most part, Connor Williams held his own against a really tight interior defensive line of the Redskins with Matt Ioannidis and Deron Payne and some of the other guys these guys have. So he's a guy who I think he's a transcending player. He's a guy who's going to continue to get better as he gets bigger, stronger, and more physical. But right now, like you said, he's the weak link on that line. But I think there's a lot of teams around the NFL who would love to have him as their left tackle or left guard. I think he's kind of a middle of the pack guy right now, and I think that's fine with where he was drafted and his transcendence coming into the league.
Well, the Dolphins would take him a tackle or guard, and so
yeah,
and he's really, it sounds like the weak link by default, because you've got, like you said, you've got
correct.
3 future Hall of Famers, you've got 1 really good right tackle, and then you've got him who's still a young guy, switched positions, had some injury problems, still emerging as we go along. Thank you for the clarification.
If he wasn't the weak link, then we would be just thrilled to death in Dallas right now. We'd have one of the best offensive lines ever.
Yeah, and it might be one of them anyway. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball here. So, something that's changed their defense so dramatically was the drafting of Leighton Vander Esch and the emergence of Jalen Smith, 2 players and 2 of the best linebackers in the league on any team, especially at their age. And it's made a huge difference for the Cowboys defense, it looks like, because you can put 2 linebackers on the field and you can cover so much ground with those 2 players.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They have Sean Lee still here as well. You kind of look at it and go, man, they have 3 guys who with Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith, and then Sean Lee, who just a few years ago was looked at as one of the best linebackers in the league. You kind of look at it as them having 3 of the best linebackers in the league, and Sean Lee's fallen off a little bit with his age, his injury history, and really when we look at it, when I go back and look at the tape, going into the year, I thought that the Cowboys linebacker core would be the one of the biggest strengths on the entire team. But man, really the first 2 weeks they've been a little bit disappointing in my opinion. Leighton Vander Esch has been a little too aggressive in his run fits. He's kind of giving poor gap assignments, and he's missed some running plays. And then Jalen Smith as well. He's been a guy who's struggled to get off blocks. He hasn't been as good sideline to sideline as we had seen in years past. With coming back from that knee injury, and then I think what those guys have done well is they've covered well. But as far as run support, they've been a little bit disappointing so far through the first 2 weeks, and it's probably because they didn't play a whole lot in preseason. They're a group who didn't see a lot of time, so they're still knocking off some rust as well. And they're just being a little too aggressive right now, which I think with time that settles down. But really, when you look at the defense as a whole, I think that with expectations coming in, that group has been the most disappointing in my opinion. And again, that might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think when you kind of sit down and break it down, you'll say, hey, these guys haven't been in the right spots at the right times, and they've missed some tackles, and that's been an issue so far, and I think it's something they'll get figured out, and this will be a good week for them because, as we both know, the Dolphins don't run the ball too efficiently.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, Dolphins averaging 1.9 yards a carry out of their top 2 running backs so far this year. So, yeah, that's a nice way to put it. When you look at the Cowboys' run defense, yeah, Saquon Barkley had, I think, 11 carries for 120 yards. One of them was a 59-yard run. So, but overall, I mean, even if you take that out, it's still a pretty healthy yards per carry average. Then again, the Cowboys did shellac the Giants in that game, I think, by 25 points. So, yeah, so the defensive line, they've moved around a couple of things there. They added Robert Quinn. How does the rest of the line look here? You've got DeMarcus Lawrence on one side, you've got Robert Quinn on the other. You've got really good depth. I think they're rostering 10 or 11 players that they can rotate in and out, even without Taco Charlton.
Mm-hmm. Well, the best run defender on that team, in my opinion, is Antoine Woods, their nose tackle, the one technique, the guy who can hang at the point of attack. He can fight off double teams. He really plugs up the middle of that line, and it makes it really tough to run the football right up the middle, right up the A's, the B gaps. But he is actually injured right now. He probably won't play this Sunday. So you'll see a lot of Christian Covington, a guy that they signed from Houston this offseason as a free agent. Good player, just not quite the run defender that Antoine Woods is. So he will be missed on Sunday. So if you guys were looking to run the football, you got a decent matchup with Antoine Woods out and Christian Covington in. But DeMarcus Lawrence has still been just in my opinion, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He doesn't have the sack numbers, but I think that's kind of a tough thing to judge pass rushers on, especially when you get the really good ones who are getting so much attention. Especially against teams who don't have the offensive line. They'll often, give 2 or 3 guys to to chip, to block, to double team, and that's what's happening. But he's still beating his one-on-one matchups. He just missed having a 2-3 sack performance against the Redskins last week, and then he obviously had a half sack against the Giants in Week 1. I think he's going to have a really big game on Sunday against the Dolphins offensive line, I should say, who doesn't have a left tackle. Who doesn't have a great right tackle either right now. I know that the offensive line is an issue, and you'll see DeMarcus Lawrence come through as a left end. He'll play on the strong side of that line. He'll run a lot of twists, a lot of stunts. He'll run a lot of one-on-one off the edge. So you'll see him coming through that line a lot. I think he's in for a big game, but also Malik Collins, the guy who plays on the interior. I think he's in for a good game as well. He's going to be very disruptive. And then Tristan Hill, the first pick of the Cowboys 2019 NFL draft in the second round. He has been inactive the first 2 games. He probably will be active this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to see what he does because he has a good matchup against a weaker interior line of the Dolphins. He should be able to make some plays and hopefully flash a little bit as the second round pick for the Cowboys this year.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners are from that Central Florida area where Tristan Hill went. Second rounder was really expected to be that project for Rod Marinelli in this defense here in this first year. So, and when you're the Cowboys and when you've got stars on your team like this, you can afford to take a player that's kind of a project like Hill. Yeah, correct. And that's what he was coming out. And again, a guy that I wasn't super high on, but I understood the pick because he's an ultra athletic dude who can get up the field. He can get in the back of the pocket. He can disrupt the pocket. Hasn't been able to get to that yet. Kind of struggled throughout the preseason. But he's a guy that again, like you said, he's a project. He's a guy that Marinelli's going to coach up for a few years, and then hopefully, this time next year or even midway through the point next year, you see a guy who's starting to put it all together, who's starting to make plays, starting to live in the backfield. And I think, like I said, he's got a good matchup this weekend, and you just hope that he's made some strides since training camp, that you see him, playing with a little bit better pad level, a little bit more discipline, a little bit better hand technique, and that's kind of what I'm excited to zone in on and see how he does against a Dolphins interior offensive line that he should be able to make a few plays against and make some flashes against, and that's what we're looking forward to seeing. Now, let's look at the defensive back position because this is a unit that, the Cowboys added a lot of players in the draft in just a couple of years. They drafted Byron Jones in the first round in 2015. Chidobe Awuzie was a second rounder. Anthony Brown was a sixth rounder, not in the same draft, but spread out over a couple of drafts. Xavier Woods is not going to play in this game at safety. But, it seems like the Cowboys with this pass rush and with the linebackers covering so much ground, it looks like these cornerbacks are holding their own, even though, some of them are 24, 25 years old.
Yeah, and like you said, Byron Jones was his first week back, I'll say, was last weekend against the Redskins because he only played a handful of snaps against the Giants. Had some ups and some downs, obviously, with his first week being back from that hip injury. It was kind of expected for him not to be as locked down as he has been in the past. But Chidobe Awuzie has been a really good player for the Cowboys after coming out of Colorado in the second round a few years back. He's been a guy who covers that right side of the field really well at times. The biggest thing with him is he's always in great position, but he struggles to get his head around and he struggles to take the football away, which can be said about every quarterback on the Cowboys roster. For the last few seasons, they struggled to take the football away. Anthony Brown, he'll be the slot corner. He'll be playing nickel. And he's a guy who's struggled so far to start the year. He wasn't great in week 1 and didn't have a great week 2 either. A guy who's just struggles coming up and making tackles, really. The coverage isn't always his issue. It's just when he's got those one-on-one opportunities to bring a guy down after making a catch or coming at him in the run game, he always seems to struggle to bring that guy down. So he's got to be more physical as a corner, and then he's got to improve as a tackler as well when coming up and playing the run. Coverage is always going to be there with him. He's a guy who's got great athletic traits, so he's always going to be around the football and coverage. But being more physical as a run defender is going to be key for him. And then Cowboys fans for the last few years have wanted to get Jordan Lewis on the field more, a third rounder out of Michigan a few years back as well. He's a guy when he plays, he's awesome. He takes the football away. He's always tough in coverage. He's always physical in the run game. But for some reason, Chris Richard, a guy who interviewed as the Miami head coach this offseason, he likes the tall, long, athletic guys. And Jordan Lewis doesn't really fit that, but he can play. So if you see any dime situations to where Jordan Lewis gets on the field this weekend, I think you'll see a guy who really stands out as a good guy. So he's a guy that's going to be hitting free agency here in a few years too. And if the Dolphins are still looking for a guy who can play inside, with Xavier Howard on the outside and moving all around, he'd be a guy to keep an eye on because he can really play.
We'll definitely make notes of that because we're continuing to jot down players who can make an impact from other teams right now for the Dolphins in 2020. So all of us have turned into scouts here. I mean, we're scouts usually as the season progresses, but more so this year. This year's a little bit different, I'd say.
Yeah.
So
and he's fun, man. He's a guy who kind of cover, when they played the Saints last year, beat the Saints, he kind of covered Alvin Kamara. Anytime he'd line up, he kind of one-on-one him, and he kind of, held Kamara in check and took the football away to win the football game in New Orleans, in that game against New Orleans. So he's a fun guy to keep an eye on for sure.
You bet. And as you probably know, the Dolphins traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, so they might be looking for somebody in the slot here this year. Sure. Or next year, excuse me. So thanks for your insight here. We appreciate your look on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So taking a look into the crystal ball this Sunday, Cowboys are heavy favorites. If it's under 3 touchdowns now, it would be a shock. What's your prediction on the score?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth. I don't think this game is going to feel close, but I actually do think the Dolphins cover. I think it's going to be a game where I think it's, what'd you say, a 21.5 point spread. I think the Dolphins cover that, and I don't think it ever feels like a close game. But I think that it's going to be a 17, 20 point game with a late score. So that always seems to happen. That's happened the last 2 weeks with the Cowboys. Both the Giants and the Redskins had a late score to kind of pull the game a little bit closer than it felt. But I think the Dolphins do cover. Just because, the Cowboys are banged up a little bit. Xavier Woods isn't going to play. Michael Gallup isn't going to play. Antoine Woods isn't going to play. So they have some guys banged up. And I just don't know if they're going to, as bad as it sounds, I don't know if they're going to play the Amari Coopers, the Zach Martin, those guys who have dealt with some injuries throughout the season so far. I wonder if it's going to be a short day for those guys. It might be a situation where the Cowboys get up 21-3, 21-7, 24-7 early, and then coming out of halftime, then the starters might play a series, and then you might see some of those guys who have dealt with some injuries come off the field, and that might allow the Dolphins to come back and get a few late scores. But if you gave me a score prediction, I think that the final score is going to be, I'll give it 35-20, something like that. Well, I guess that would make that would be the score I'd give them, is 35-20, 15-point game. And again, I think that one of those touchdowns might come late, and it might be a closer score than what it would feel like.
Yeah, so it's 21.5 right now, and if it were a 15-point game, that would certainly be progress, especially if you have Josh Rosen, who's starting this game now, gets at least 250, 300 yards through the air,
which I think
even if it's in garbage time.
I think Josh Rosen getting the start is smart for a team, because the games I've watched Miami the last 2 weeks, and the time that Josh Rosen has been in the game, he's played much better than what I've seen from Fitzpatrick. His wide receivers have let him down big time. I just think Josh Rosen is the smart play going forward if you want to try to win some football games, which I know that might not be what Miami wants to do right now.
Absolutely. That is the reality of this 2019 season. After this game, Paul and I are going to be saying 3 games down, 13 games to go until the end of the year, because that's how we have to look at it as it stands. But we are looking for individual performances going forward, and who knows, maybe we see something interesting along the way. It's a long season. Well, thanks for joining us here tonight. We're joined by Connor Livesay from Blogging the Boys on the Super Bowl Network, or the SB Nation Network. So be sure to check out his podcast, his website. Throw him some questions as he goes along here in Twitter, and we go along here throughout this 2019 season. And you can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and on Spotify. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see